We've recently had a very strange controversy of sorts come out of the state of Nebraska. Rumors started to circulate in early September that Werner Enterprises, a trucking company based in Omaha, Nebraska, was working with the country of Kenya to bring Kenyan truck drivers to the United States. Now, those rumors aren't based entirely on speculation. There have been delegations going back and forth for over a year. Warner has denied the rumors in no uncertain terms, but still, people are upset, very upset. And most recently, we've gotten both the signing of a memorandum of understanding and also dueling public announcements between the governor of Nebraska and Nebraska's Secretary of State. So, in this week's episode of Art of Supply, I will take you through the facts as I found them, including timeline, a critical piece of this story. We'll talk about pictures that seem to have been worth far more than 1,000 words. Who said what, including representatives of the federal government, as well as media sites from Kenya. And as always, the lessons I think we can all learn from what happened here. So let's start by running through the series of events that led up to these recent headlines. In February of 2024, Nebraska Secretary of State Robert Evnen made an exploratory trip to Kenya. May 2024, a meeting with a Kenyan delegation was held at Werner's headquarters. Then, 16 months went by with almost no news on either side. In September of 2025, the story picks back up. On the 2nd, the Nebraska Secretary of State made another trip to Kenya, this time to sign that memorandum of understanding between his state and the country of Kenya. That news hit, and the upset started to build. By 1 week later, September 9th, Warner came out and denied that there was any plan to hire Kenyan truck drivers. 2 days after that, on September 11th, Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen denied any involvement in the memorandum. And it seems like going from February and May of 2024 to all of this happening in September of 2025, things escalated quickly. But it actually took a very long time to go from the beginning to where we found ourselves with the upset in September. That February of 2024 mission, when the Secretary of State led that trade mission to Kenya, his office released a prepared statement that said the primary focus of the trip was agriculture. 3 months later, that delegation from Kenya visited the United States, and Warner did host the meeting at its headquarters in Omaha. Now, here's where we come to the pictures, and I have a feeling this is what fueled a lot of the online speculation. An article about that meeting between the Kenyan delegation and it was held at the Warner headquarters. A picture ran in a Kenyan publication called The Kenyan Diaspora. And in that picture, it showed Warner representatives, including CEO Derek Leathers, with the company's logo on the wall in the conference room behind them all. In that article, no Warner representatives were mentioned and no Warner representatives were quoted. The article did quote Nebraska Secretary of State Evnen as saying, quote, "There are tens of thousands of truck driving jobs that are open at any given time," end quote. But according to Landline Media, Secretary Evnen hadn't participated in the meeting. He was simply quoted because it was perceived as being part of the relationship, part of the back and forth. The article also said, and this is quoting the Kenyan diaspora, quote, "Werner Enterprises is one of the largest logistics companies in the United States and has been a key player in the industry for decades. Their discussions centered on exploring avenues to engage Kenyan truck drivers overseas and support the Kenyan diaspora in securing more opportunities for employment and enterprise development." Also quoted in that article were officials from Kenya. Principal Secretary, State Department for Diaspora Affairs, Ministry of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs head, Rosaline Ngoyu said, quote, further extended an invitation to the Werner Enterprise team to visit Nairobi with the aim of further solidifying the engagements and allowing the team to witness the hardworking spirit of Kenyans firsthand. Additionally, it would provide an opportunity for the company to train prospective Kenyan recruits on the requirements needed to qualify for positions at Werner Enterprises. Now, despite the discussion at Werner and the quotes included from both the Secretary of State from Nebraska and also from the Principal Secretary from Kenya, none of the articles I read suggest that anyone from Werner took the Principal Secretary up on her offer. At the time, an article ran in a local paper, the KSNB Local 4, and that was published right after that meeting in May. Again, we get a picture. And in that picture, we see a Kenyan delegation touring Grand Island Express, a refrigerated trucking company also located in Nebraska. Now, Grand Island Express currently has over 20 employees with green card sponsorships and 60 more going through the process of obtaining one. Then we enter the long period of silence 16 months with no interviews, no announcements, until September 2nd, when Nebraska Secretary of State Evnen traveled back to Kenya to sign the Memorandum of Understanding. Now, an official statement from the Secretary of State regarding his 1-week trade and investment mission in early September said that the primary focus was the promotion of Nebraska corn growers, Nebraska producers of ethanol and dried distillers grains, and Nebraska irrigation technology companies. The signing took place at the Kenya-Nebraska Agriculture, Trade, and Investment Conference in Nairobi. Again, we have Kenyan perspectives on this as well. The State Department for Diaspora Affairs called the agreement a, quote, landmark deal between Nebraska and Kenya, formally titled a Labor Mobility and Diaspora Support Memorandum of Understanding. And here, too, we have a picture. In this case, the article contains a picture of Secretary Evnen signing the deal along with Ngoju. Now, according to an article that was published in Kenyans, Evnen said Nebraska carriers had begun to hire Kenyan drivers. The article also quotes Evnen as saying, "We have commercial truck drivers already who are being trained, particularly in Kenya, and then they complete their training in Nebraska." Without quoting anyone directly, the article goes on to say, quote, "This initiative is in direct response to the pressing shortage of commercial drivers in the United States, particularly those operating tractor-trailer combinations." So you've got all of these pieces coming together. In some cases, quotes from people who weren't at meetings, pictures of people and headquarters at meetings where they weren't quoted. You have invitations being extended that we don't necessarily have any evidence were taken up. And so it's very difficult when you start to look at all of these pieces in combination to sort out what was said, by who, about what, who accepted what offer, and even what trucking company was being discussed. A Freight Caviar article on the story reads, quote, "Nebraska Secretary of State Robert Evnen underscored the state's current demand for licensed drivers. We began with labor mobility with commercial driver's licenses. These are skilled truck driving positions. We have a need for that in the United States. We have the need for that in Nebraska, and we have training available in Nebraska. Now we have labor mobility with Kenya, where Kenyans will be able to become CDL drivers in Nebraska and throughout the United States." Now, this is where people seem to have put 2 and 2 together, potentially gotten the answer of 5, and inferring that this all meant Werner Enterprises was hiring Kenyan truck drivers. I believe the best description of the general online response to this inference among media outlets and the driver community is ba-boom. It did not go well. And once the, let's call it, emotional headline was out there, it was very difficult to pull it back. I watched an episode of one show called Bonehead Truckers that ran on Truckers Report, and it infers from the news coverage that Werner will hire Kenyan drivers. The host cites the fact that drivers don't get paid more as proof that there is currently no shortage justifying the program. And the host is open about the fact that he personally has a bone to pick with Warner based on his past experience as a driver. Now, this is all valid. I've covered in past episodes that there's disagreement about whether there's actually a driver shortage or whether there's a lot of turnover or a qualified driver shortage. And I'm sure anybody that's worked for a large company, you're going to find some alumni that are happy and some alumni not so much. There's an additional piece here, though. The Bonehead Truckers host thinks that the American Trucking Association, which is associated with Warner's CEO Derek Leathers, favors autonomous trucks and foreign drivers as a way of making trucking cheaper. Now, all of this sort of coverage is likely what caused Werner Enterprises, their CEO, and the governor of Nebraska to wade into the fray. Warner's official statement ran on X, formerly known as Twitter, and it read, quote, Warner Enterprises wishes to clarify that we are not involved in any agreements or discussions regarding the recruitment of Kenyan truck drivers to the United States. Any claims suggesting otherwise are just false. Warner's CEO Derek Leathers made his own statement on X. Quote, while I like the work you're doing to shine a light on many issues that need addressed in our industry, I must disappoint you on this one. We did not, do not, and will not work to bring drivers in from foreign countries on visas or otherwise. Please reread the article. Now, after reading that, I did the thing that's either exciting or dangerous, depending on your point of view. I started reading the comments. And one of Leather's comments in response to someone was about this issue of the driver shortage. He said, quote, I literally did a podcast last week citing the reality that there are more CDL holders than there are jobs available. A bigger issue is that many are not employable due to driving record. As for the thousands that have suffered through a job loss, if interested, please apply. So what started to happen is people were drawing a line between the meeting that took place at Warner headquarters in May of 2024 and a signing that took place in Kenya in September of 2025. A lot of interest has risen up in this story, and a spokesperson for Warner ended up releasing the following statement to FreightWaves to include in their coverage of the story. Quote, in May 2024, at the request of the Nebraska Secretary of State's office, Warner hosted a group of dignitaries from Kenya as part of a standard trade mission visit. The conversation at Warner covered a variety of topics. However, there were no commitments made or discussions regarding a program or Warner sponsoring visas. The group visited multiple companies across various industries in Nebraska and held discussions, but there were no takeaways, follow-up discussions, or meetings involving Warner since that time. Whatever agreement the Secretary of State may have made during his recent visit does not include Werner Enterprises. Now, on Thursday, September 11th, this is when Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen enters the conversation. He made an official statement about that memorandum with Kenya, writing, quote, the Secretary of State is an independent state constitutional office and is neither directly accountable to the governor nor in control of any code agency of state government, including the Department of Motor Vehicles. That agency is directly accountable to the governor, who is likewise principally responsible for conducting the state of Nebraska's foreign trade activities. So this is all a big enough deal for the governor of Nebraska to speak publicly about it on September 11th of all days. And part of why I think this is the case has to do with how important truck driving is as a profession in the state of Nebraska. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Nebraska has the third highest concentration of jobs by location in heavy and tractor-trailer truck drivers, behind only Arkansas and North Dakota. And Lincoln, Nebraska is the top-paying metropolitan area for heavy and tractor-trailer truck drivers. They pay on average $37 an hour. That's ahead of even San Francisco, Oakland, and Hayward, California, which come in at $32 an hour. There is also some concern about the safety record of Kenyan drivers specifically that was included in some of the articles. According to the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, the fatality rate in Kenya was estimated to be 27.8 per 100,000 inhabitants by the World Health Organization in 2023. That puts them among the highest in Africa, and it almost twice the global average. By comparison, so if Kenya's estimated at 27.8 per 100,000 inhabitants, the global average road fatality rate is only 15 per 100,000 people. And that's also World Health Organization data. Now, for all of this upset, it may in fact be a moot issue. On August 21st, long before anybody traveled back to Kenya and signed anything, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that he was pausing worker visas for commercial truck drivers. This came in the aftermath of Harjinder Singh, a driver who caused multiple fatalities in a crash in Florida on August 12th. Although Singh held a commercial driver's license from the state of California, there are still lingering questions about his ability to read road signs as well as to safely operate the vehicle. And this is something the Nebraska Secretary of State seems to be aware of. A spokeswoman for Evidence said in an email to FreightWaves that the Memorandum of Understanding is, quote, stated in general terms and says nothing about truck drivers. The MOU requires full compliance with all Nebraska and federal laws, and that includes the President's executive order on CDL driver requirements and U.S. immigration law. And I can say truthfully, I read the public statement, although the full MOU wasn't available, but that public statement from the Nebraska Secretary of State does not, in fact, talk about truck drivers. Now, besides being an absolutely wild story, what lessons can we learn from all this? The first one is to control your brand exposure. Now, being in the podcast and webinar and interview business, I spend a lot of time working with PR and comms teams. I now appreciate every single thing they put all of us through every single time. That picture of the Werner CEO with the company's logo on the wall behind everyone in that conference room didn't mean the company had plans to bring Kenyan truck drivers to Nebraska, but it didn't do anything to quell the rumors either. Let's face it, people don't read. So if you see an article with a juicy headline and you open it up and there's this big picture of executives from a company meeting with a foreign delegation with the company logo on the back wall, a lot of people are going to draw incorrect conclusions. The second lesson is that on the internet, everything lives forever, but it also has a way of flattening the timelines. So anyone that read coverage of the September 2025 memorandum and did a quick search would unquestionably come up with coverage of the May 2024 visit of the Kenyan delegation to Werner headquarters. Did people check the dates on those articles? I doubt it. I did, but I was researching this story. I had to consciously think about it, partially because I wanted to be able to share the details accurately with you. And finally, timing is everything. In looking back at all of the pieces as they were released, regardless of whether they were from American media or Kenyan, I didn't see evidence that anyone was upset about anything in February or May of 2024. Now, maybe that was because the vast majority of the coverage of that visit seems to have been on Kenyan news sites. But in the aftermath of that horrific crash in Florida, this story, everything that happened in September, caught like wildfire. What's that expression? Bad news travels the world while good news is still putting on its pants in the morning? Unfortunately, in this case, that seems to be what happened. Now, I don't see anything that proves Werner ever had plans to bring Kenyan truck drivers to the United States. They're welcome to have whatever conversations they like. Unfortunately, that isn't always how that works. And now they find themselves investing energy, investing communications time, trying to explain away something they didn't do, which in some ways is harder than trying to explain away something you did do. It's not an enviable position, to be sure, for anybody involved. But it also provides a good reminder to the rest of us. If you read a story and it's upsetting, check the facts, look at the timelines. Just make sure you have all of the details together before you add your own thoughts to that comment stream.